Let's just hit the old record button and see what happens. I do like this flamingo, by the way.
Thank you. Did you see the back of the shirt?
No, I didn't. It's like...
It says yikes.
That's like very neon was the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. You know, yikes is one of my favorite words because...
it's a great word.
You can use it for just the lowest, like, oh, someone said something weird to someone else. Or like, yikes, there's...
somebody breaking into my apartment.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, and for the record, the camera is right there.
Yikes.
It's I remember like the first like many videos I took, I was just like look at myself on the screen, and then just like you could see like when you're watching the video back, it's like, hey, he's just looking at himself, and then finally I figured, oh, it's like, oh, the camera's there.
Yeah, I think I actually go back and forth on my videos where sometimes I would be looking at the screen and sometimes I'm looking at the video.
I mean, it's hard when you're just such a sexy bastard. You just can't help but like check yourself out. I mean, it's just natural, really.
Agreed.
So, Alex, what do you want to talk about? What's going on? Just gonna like look all professional here.
Yeah. Just talking about professional stuff. How are you so professional?
It's the books. Yeah, the books and the hand pump, really. I haven't done that for a while. So welcome to Toronto.
Thank you.
It's super long. Did you drive?
I took I didn't drive, but I was driven.
There was a car involved.
There was a car involved.
Good drive?
It's a good drive. Until we got into the last like 45 minutes of the city, then it was disgusting, but the first 4 hours.
Right, the whole part where you're like coming into the city.
Yeah.
And so I forget, what brought you to town?
Seeing family, seeing this guy, just taking some time away, being in a different environment for a little bit, and seeing how things play out, how that affects my creative process.
Well, good to have you back. I mean, I feel like we had a really good day today, walking, talking, discussing the secrets of the universe, talking about how to develop good habits. You were asking about, what was your question? You were asking about like how to like keep going.
Yeah, where it's like it feels like it's easy to fall back into habits, especially
just give up.
Yeah. Like anytime you do something new, it's like it touches you in all the wrong ways that like, oh, this feels different.
Done. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. So the question is, what separates somebody who like dabbles and gives up versus like, oh, I want to follow this through. And you know, you have books that say start with your why. But then some people are like, well, I just hate my situation. That's why. Like, I want a different job. And that doesn't seem like enough of a motivator to do something brand new and different. Some people, you know, they want a new career path. Maybe they're in fucking technology and they want to go towards art or philosophy. And it's like, well, one of them is really practical and it makes me money and I can see it right away. But one of them, it's almost like corporeal. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to cement a real job or make money with it. But some people somehow do it anyways. And some people just, like, give up at the first major issue. And, like, for myself, I feel like I've spent 90% of the time failing and falling behind. But if I've had one quality I appreciate about myself is that I've never fucking quit.
Keep going.
Yeah.
It's a big question for sure. I think for me, what drives me to keep going is I've got a certain feeling of like, I guess, desire for independence. It's kind of an easy way to describe it. A desire for freedom. I think I hate that feeling that. What I hate is the feeling that I have to go to a job because I have no other option, right? It's like I have to go to this office with this boss who's going to tell me to do all these things that I don't want to do, and I feel like I have no sense of freedom. Like, familiar with the concept of people talking about like having fuck you money?
I can imagine what it would mean. Yeah.
Right. Basically, having like whatever that number is, 50K, 100K, cash in the bank, so that you're kind of set no matter what. It's like, all right, if I'm in a situation at work where I'm just like, don't want to do it, don't like it, goes against my morals, whatever. It's like I've got the cash ready that I can just walk away, and I know for the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever, I can pay my bills, right? And so, what drives me, it's not money specifically that drives me. I'm more driven by skills. Like I'm driven by the idea of having certain specific, hopefully rare skill sets that make me very valuable, that would allow me to basically leverage my skills for a high income and low amount of, say, work that's required, right? So instead of doing like low level grunt work, having, like, I work in marketing, right? So having higher level insights around marketing that are really, really extremely useful and valuable, so that I have more, say, like mobility or maneuverability, because it's like I know that I have a skill that's useful that I can take other places. And so that's kind of, I think that's what I'm on the hunt for, and I've found partly, and I'm still putting the pieces together, but what I'm hunting for is that skill set that basically that gives me the freedom to, if I'm like, all right, I want to leave, if I want to go work for somebody else, if I want to start my own business, it's like I have the skill set that gives me that freedom and mobility that I can do it.
I think that sounds pretty great, and being motivated to have, like, to be good at something, it feels good to do it. You're like, oh, I'm good at this, and especially like in the current kind of climate where people are switching jobs every year or 2 years, it's like hard to build expertise and be like, oh, I'm really passionate about this. I'm good at it. I want to do more of it. I want to find my niche. But then also there's people that have amazing skill but aren't motivated to put it to use in like their own way.
And I mean, I guess that comes down to people's personal, like, what they find important, right? And so, like, I'm just thinking back to some points in my previous careers where, like, there were certain points where, like, one example that came to mind was like, it was the end of the year, it was salary review time, and basically ended up, even though like I worked my butt off that whole year, ended up getting this like really teeny tiny raise, and my boss just basically being like, well, there was nothing I could do about it, the decision came from up above. And I just remember in that moment feeling this complete sense of like powerlessness, of feeling like, crap, like, I need this job, I can't leave it. If I leave it, I don't have an income, and then how am I going to pay my bills and my rent? But like, here I am feeling like I'm kind of getting shit on, and I just kind of have to sit here and take it. And it was that kind of moment of like, I hated being in that position where I felt like I had no choice. And so that's what drives me to keep going and keep learning, and have all these books, and I've read some of them and pretended like I've read other ones. But that's what drives me to keep going, is I always want to feel like I have a choice, and I'm not just getting the short end of the stick. I'm not just getting like the short straw, the long straw, the short straw, the short straw.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel.
And I guess other people maybe just don't really care about that so much. They're like, my bills are paid, I've got an apartment, cool.
I wonder though, and this is part of the reason I wanted to talk about it, is how much of it is like not realizing it, or having the awareness that like, oh, I have these skills, or there's a possibility for freedom that exists that is within reach. Like, if I do XYZ, I'll have my fuck you money, I'll be good at what I'm doing, and I'll be like transferable. I can do more of what I want in the places that I want, because we grow up in an environment where you go to school, everyone does the same thing, you're basically like locked into a career by the time you finish school. And like, I was on a train once, and I was talking to a kid who was an engineer, And he's like, well, I better not fuck this up because I have to do it for the rest of my life because I'm going for this degree. And I was like, let me just give you one piece of advice. Like, you're not stuck. Through online courses, there are a million different like productive ways to learn after school. But other than like stupid corporate trainings, most people will never like be introduced to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about learning as an adult and you see like colleges have like night courses or companies make you go to $10,000 trainings, and it's like it's to make more money. It's not to actually teach you, to give you a skill you can use somewhere else. So like knowing that, hey, you can become an art coach in probably 2 years as someone who is just like, I like drawing, but I don't know, like you can find 100 people who draw worse than you do, and you could learn how to coach them and the basics of what you're doing and like change your career in a couple of years in that way. But it's like that you need to know that possibility exists to be motivated enough to want the freedom to do it. So I think it's just like there's like a weird, as much as we watch so much television and we have the internet and we have access to more information and lifestyles and feedback and advice than we've ever had, it's still possible to not be aware of all the possibilities of what you could be doing instead.
Agreed. I think there's also some people that just don't care, right? It's like, I guess the word is maybe comfortable. It's just like they're getting paid okay, they can pay their bills, and it doesn't feel important to them to kind of have that level of leverage. Maybe it's like one of those things where like, yeah, it would be nice if, but I don't really care that much because it's not that pressing. Whereas for me, like, this is something that drove my parents insane. But I've always had that kind of independent spirit, in that I always had a lot of difficulty whenever my parents wanted to like show me something or help me with something, or like, I don't know, maybe help me with my homework, or I forget, just like teach me something. I remember going golfing with my dad, and my dad's trying to like teach me a golf swing or whatever it is. I was just always just like, I want to learn it myself. I want to do it myself. I want to know how to do it myself. I want to figure it out myself. And so I was always very independent like that. And so maybe that's part of it. And so I've just had this certain independence is just very important to me. And maybe for some people, like some people prefer that dependence is the wrong word, but just they like that close community. Mm-hmm. They like having a certain friend group that they feel comfortable with. They're, I don't know, close with their family. It's like they've got a kind of like tight knit circle. And it's just they like that feeling of comfort and security, and so they don't feel the need to like be independent.
Yeah, I feel like comfort is definitely super common, but I also feel like some people that are comfortable or have just like given up and like aren't aware that there's a way out for them to not have to deal with the shit that they're dealing with anymore too. So like, because the comfortable people that don't give a shit will like, they're fine. Like they don't give a shit, they're comfortable, there's nothing to learn or do, and they wouldn't watch a video like this anyways. But for the people that are like, oh, like I want to do something, but I am just so comfortable and like I'd like to change. Yeah, it can take time for them to find the right advice or the right direction to take to feel like they're moving forward, they're actually getting some shit done that then motivates them to keep going too.
Well, so that does bring up a really good point, is that I think for a lot of people it does take a certain catalyst, like it does take a big moment in their life. Because now I'm reflecting back on my life, and as much as I always had that independent mindset, I'm also thinking back to like when I was, I don't know, 17, say like 17 to like 23, in that like end of high school, university kind of phase. I had zero interest in any extracurricular, right? Like I had zero interest in putting in extra effort to, I don't know, be on the student council or like shoot to like I always got good grades in school, so I'd get like I don't know, kind of like B plus, A minus kind of student, right? So never like an A plus student, but like always decent. But I never felt motivated to be like, all right, I need to get like 100 on the test, right? I was always very, I worked hard, but I never felt ever like I had to put in any extra effort. My whole goal in university is like, I'm doing an engineering degree. When I get my engineering degree, that piece of paper is gonna let me get an engineering job, and having just a basic engineering job, that's going to pay my bills, and I'm going to be okay, right? So I was super on board with that whole pathway. But then what happened for me is within a short couple of years, I broke up with my girlfriend. I had some very close family members to me like pass away, so suddenly there's all this like death and breakup and all this like shit going on in my life. And that started waking me up to the reality of, okay, life is actually pretty short here. And then I started feeling kind of trapped in some of these, say, business corporate situations. And then this whole thing started kicking in of like, okay, no, I wanna be in a position of power. I want to be in a position of authority where now I'm able to maneuver as I want to, as opposed to being stuck in the whims of what somebody else wants. And so it did take that big kind of catalytic moment to kind of electroshock me into that awareness. So that, again, everybody's journey is different, but that's, for some people, they're gonna need that moment to kind of wake them up and be like, whoa, what is going on here? And it has to be pretty dramatic.
Well, there's usually two ways it seems to happen according to coaches and teachers and stuff. Either, yes, the big event where everything falls apart, you lose a job, you break up, both happens, family member dies, you have a near-death experience.
Your wife divorces you and like takes all your money, and suddenly you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. The other is just like the dullness of life becomes so big, like it weighs so heavily that you're like, well, either I'm gonna like kill myself or like find a way to do this forever, or okay, I have to do something new, you know? And then typically that's when you have like the midlife crisis, right? Like that's typically not the big event. It's like, oh, I've spent 40 years of my life just doing the same thing, but I've always wanted to draw or drive a motorcycle. And you have people just taking these big dramatic things. But because it was like a slow build-up, mostly they just go back to what they were doing because there wasn't sufficient motivation to like change at that point. Because yeah, for myself too, it was like I lost a job after I moved out and I had no money, and I never wanted to work in a place that I hated again. So, you know, I started applying to jobs differently. I became super hardcore in my like interviewing and resume. I became so good at something I hated because anytime I had a cycle of like adjusting my resume, going in interviews, I was like, I hate every minute of every experience. And the first thing I was like, I'm gonna get really good at this thing that I hate and that most people hate. And that was the first time that I saw like a real world impact of like changing the way I am, changing the way people perceive me, seeing that I can do something differently, even though this was like one of the worst types, because when you don't have a job, you don't have money, and it's just like it's the most high pressure thing. And then you go into job interviews super needy because of it. So I got good at that, and then I found a job that like sounded amazing, and I moved cities for it. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm in a new environment. I want to try new things. And I too, like, never did any extracurriculars in school, and my grades were bad too. But I made it through. And then in the workplace, like, I was taking part in everything. I was joining Toastmasters and doing all this stuff. And because I was like motivated, I was like, oh, I saw that I can get better at one thing. And I had a trainer at the time who was like, oh, read this book. And I'm like, oh, you can become more social, you can become more charismatic, you can become more comfortable. And like we were joking earlier that like most people give a public speaking presentation a couple times in school, all the kids are snickering, you don't know what you're doing, you're just standing awkwardly reading off cue cards, and you're like, oh, I hate public speaking. So then that person, when they go to something like Toastmasters and they're talking in public, and maybe eventually you go to like speak on stage at a competition or something, you're like, oh, I mastered this thing that I sucked at. I changed like my fate, my trajectory, my path. And so that's part of my motivation is like how good, like if I could spend, a couple weeks fixing my interview and resume game and then start getting tons of interviews and doing really good at them, what can I do with months or years dedicated to something? What can other people do that, just because you had the image, I'm bad at this, I can't do that. Like we were talking about self-image. If your self-image is, oh, I'm bad at school, then you're going to sabotage yourself. If your image is, I can only be a low-level employee, when you're up for promotion, you're going to sabotage yourself. When you're up for manager, you're going to sabotage yourself. When you get an opportunity to maybe start a business with a friend, but you're thinking, oh, I'm a low-level employee, you're going to sabotage yourself. So that little opening of like, what if I can do this? What if I can be better? And just seeing yourself get better at something, I think can have a dramatic impact. And like, you can't forget that you got better. You might struggle to get better as fast at other things, but once you see it's possible to change and improve and do things differently, for me, that's a lot of the motivation to like keep going even when like nothing good new happens. I know that even sometimes a short period can dramatically change everything.
It's just like hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said was really important about what, like you were talking about getting good at interviews and realizing that, yeah, if you put in your time and your work and do the 10,000 hours, not to say that you want to put in 10,000 hours of interviews, it would be an interesting skill to get, but that you can really master and perfect one thing, which I'm really into. Like, do you know Robert Greene?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love him.
Because he's got his book Mastery, which is very similar, I felt, to like Cal Newport's Deep Work, right? And so I love that idea of just kind of picking one thing and just like relentlessly focusing on it and just becoming the master at that, becoming like the industry specialist in that niche, like whatever that is, but just being like, because I think it's so easy to